Hi, my name is Debbie. I'm 18 and I almost became my boss's sweetheart. Have you ever been paid attention to by a man who, well, shouldn't have done that? Your teacher or your boss? I was in that situation. But it was more complicated than you think. Watch this video to the end and you'll find out how I had to fight my boss's powerful wife for my promotion. I aimed at my future career since kindergarten and stubbornly walked towards the goal without looking around. In my graduating class, I won a competition from one well known magazine in our state. No one was particularly surprised, including me. What was the reward, you might ask? Internship at this very magazine. Certainly not paid, but for an 18-year-old girl, it was already awesome news. Such a great start, I thought, and agreed. The boss, Mr. Stempson, or Fred as he immediately told me to address him, and it was already embarrassing if you understand me, turned out to be just a cool boss. I had been working in the magazine for about a month when near the coffee maker, I heard a secret from a colleague, Scott, that the boss needed a new editor and younger to work with the youngest target audience of our magazine. Some new and cool project was planned, and I started trying to hang around Fred, showing him what a valuable and diligent worker I was. You won't believe it. It worked out. What would you do in my shoes? Would you sit like a mouse and hope you'd be noticed? Fred allowed me to work on the project and, even cooler, promised me a new position instead of the boring rank of an intern. He began to talk to me more often, lingered at my desk, and I melted with joy because he was awesome both as the boss and the interlocutor. His good attitude towards me transferred into a personal invitation to the annual corporate, closed in an expensive restaurant. Yesterday's schoolgirl in my face just squealed with delight. Fred came to the party with his wife. I had never seen her before, and I would prefer not to see her again because at first glance the tension between us thickened. I was a naive fool who thought only about her internship, and just in case, I decided to try to make Amy like me. That was the name of Fred's wife. But whatever I did, she only looked angrier and angrier. The next morning, Scotty and I went to the cafe and discussed the party and all the details. I told him about the incident with the boss's wife, and a colleague rushed to explain that the boss's wife was wildly jealous. Well, thank you. Very in time. I was now the main suspect in the case of seducing someone else's husband. I didn't have time to worry because on the same day my first big meeting was waiting for me. It was my ticket to the world of big journalism, although I didn't know about it yet. We were sitting around a huge desk in the boss's office and just chatting, offering a lot of fresh offers, and Fred couldn't help but brag about me. His secretary didn't have time to take notes. Near the end of the meeting, the boss shook my hand and, in front of everyone, told me that he would trust me to write my own weekly column. Beauty tips for teenagers and other stuff, but even this seemed like a huge breakthrough to me. The only thing that ruined my life was Amy. She worked for the same magazine, but it was the first meeting we both attended. She reminded me of a toad pouted with anger. And when Fred praised me and appointed me in charge of the column, I was even afraid that his spouse would now burst. As I walked to the workplace, Amy intercepted me near the smoking pod. She unceremoniously grabbed me by the elbow and forcefully dragged me into a smoke-filled but empty room. After the meeting, all smokers spent at least 10 minutes here. The boss's wife sat me on a chair and started asking me questions about my personal life. It was very unpleasant. I answered through my teeth and tried not to grudge, especially when Amy moved on to a topic that really interested her: my relationship with her husband. She tactfully hinted to me that there was no place for such an upstart and that I could lose my job. I ran out of the smoking pot as soon as I could, and I was scared, I confess. I was hoping this topic wouldn't come up again, but in vain. It just got worse. Fred arranged a team building exercise for his staff in nature, a real team rafting on the river in boats. I had no experience, and the boss carefully insisted that I got into the same boat with him. He said he had a lot of experience and he would be able to keep me safe. If I knew we were going to swim with Amy, I'd be sick, honest word. This rafting turned into torture as soon as I felt on myself her eerie, icy look. Imagine being in the same boat with your worst enemy. How do you feel? It was not fun. Drowning then seemed like a worthy alternative. Fred and I boarded paired paddles on the sides, and Amy became the helmsman on the stern. We passed the rapids quite cheerfully, but on one of them, the boat shook so much that the water whipped inside and its flow pressed me against the board. And then the wave pulled me down, and I dramatically changed my mind to drown, but I couldn't do anything. Fortunately, Fred's sturdy palm clung into my waist, and the boss snarled me back into the leveled boat. The problems didn't end there. Amy turned white with anger, squeezed her paddle, the boat shook again, and with a loud splash, my boss's wife spit into the water. She was immediately pulled out, the boat was directed to shore, and Amy crouched on rocks to dry, but she was so angry that the air around her shook. She slapped poor Scott for not bringing her towels fast enough. The end of team building turned into a real test. We got to the end point of the rafting some way, but everything tumbled out of my hands under Amy's contemptuous gaze. Do you know how I hate gossip? Oh, and at work, it's inevitable. Very soon, we heard a rumor that the boss, for some personal service, was ready to make me, an inexperienced intern, an editor of a new project. When Scotty told me about it, adding that Amy was already aware and in a rage, I just freaked out. I felt the need to quit and spit on everything, but let Fred down, who believed in me? I couldn't do that. Fred called me out to himself to talk about a new project, a new position, and all that. I tried to refuse. I was making a fool out of myself. I was afraid to even imagine Amy's reaction to my promotion, but the boss didn't give me a chance to speak out. He got excited, convincing me, saying something about young blood and fresh thoughts. He looked very flushed, and his tie pulled up somewhere on his side, and when Fred started to correct it, he got hopelessly confused in a loop, and I had to rush to help him. When Amy entered the office without knocking, she wouldn't figure out why I stood so close to her husband and why I was holding his tie. She just started to yell. We tried to make excuses, showed the tie, but Amy's anger didn't know any measure, and our words only infuriated her. After 24 hours, everybody was poking a finger in my back, giggling and gossiping. It was beginning to look like bullying, and I decided to quit. Now, finally, I was late with the resignation letter. The next meeting began, and the boss promised to listen to me later. The prospect of being in front of all those gossipers was not great, but I had no choice. I thought I was going to be the target for general hatred, but Fred praised me and the whole team so sincerely that I was even touched. But not everyone liked it, and someone started freely in front of Fred, mumbling that I got this promotion in a famous way. And when Fred was indignant and protected me, Amy came in, and she had a look. Everything's clear with you. Red with anger, she came up to me and spit out in my face that I was a brazen schoolgirl who was ready to ruin someone else's marriage for the sake of her career. Well, I responded by calling her a jealous tantrum and walked out of the office, slamming the door. Everything in me literally pulsed and burned from the anger. I felt like a living torch. I didn't even want to cry, so I freaked out. Scott found me, said Fred put his wife in place and that the position of editor was mine and leaving the magazine was unnecessary. But honestly, I never had any desire to stay here. I took a letter of recommendation from Fred and attached it to my college papers. I walked out the magazine's office with my head held high. I decided to dive into my studies with a head. And in 2 years, I plan to take a part-time job in another edition. It's not so solid, but it's not so scandalous. Did someone else's patronage backfire? Tell me about it in the comments. If you want to hear more news stories, Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon. Everyone for now, until new meetings.